Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. It is great to be with y'all on this Friday evening right before the weekend, and we've got a little bit of football to talk about. Does preseason count? It counts, right? It's something. I am going to be leading my show off with the preseason topic, talking about the Tennessee Titans rookie quarterback, Malik Willis. I'll discuss his performance, why I think he could be the future for the Titans. I'll lead the show off with that. Also talking Draymond Green's starting five, all-time starting five. He was asked about that in his podcast the other day. And to be completely honest, I agree with every single move that he make in terms of, the great players he put at each position, all five positions. I'll talk about that. As well as Jimmy Garappolo. There's rumors, and matter of fact, reports, I would go so far as to say, out of Cleveland that they could be looking at him in case Deshaun Watson's suspension is increased. I hate to say I told you so, but 2 weeks ago, I literally said, I'll get into that later in the show. Antonio Brown's saying all kinds of weird crap. Again, I'll end the show with that. And also, the subject I'm looking most forward to discussing on the show, it'll be the fourth topic, is what Dwyane Wade said on a podcast the other day when talking about how the media sort of looks at certain players from previous generations as opposed to how they look at them now. And I think he makes a great point and exposes a big, big flaw in the NBA media. I will discuss that later on in the show. But first, there's a football game to talk about. Okay, I guess the biggest headline from this game between the Titans and the Ravens is that the Baltimore Ravens have won 21 straight preseason games, which is an NFL record. So congratulations to the Ravens. That is an impressive feat, I guess. I mean, hey, listen, you'd rather win than lose, right? Even though it doesn't count for anything, you'd rather win than lose. But the bigger picture, I think, of this game is Malik Willis, right? He got the start for the Titans. He played the entire first half, showed some flashes, right? You look at his stat line, it's pretty good, right? 6 for 11, 107 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, a pass rating of 88, and he did run 4 touchdowns, a very, very athletic play, getting outside the pocket, and we know he can run. He actually last night averaged 7.6 yards per carry, 5 carries for 38 yards. So we know Malik Willis is mobile. We know he can get outside the pocket, make plays. And Malik Willis was one of the real mysteries coming out of this 2022 draft. I talked about it on this show. Actually, I didn't talk about it on the show. I talked about it in social media because I was sick as a dog with the flu. But the thing that I always said about Malik Willis is, do I think he's like a lock, like a Trevor Lawrence or somebody who I think like absolutely can be a franchise quarterback, like a Kyler Murray type talent, like absolute franchise quarterback, has a chance to be a superstar. I'm not sold on that yet. I'm not going to go there, right? But I did believe that he was a first-round talent. And as much as I like Kenny Pickett, I'm not down on Kenny Pickett at all. I think he's a talented kid. He can move, solid arm, fairly accurate, right? I think Pittsburgh got a good future quarterback, and we'll see how he pans out this year should he replace Mitchell Trubisky in Pittsburgh. But I liked Malik Willis more as a talent. And I liked his intangibles a little more than Kenny Pickett's. It's not even a shot at Kenny Pickett's intangibles, but you're talking about a guy in Malik Willis who commanded the locker room when he was there at Liberty, his last 2 years of his college career, I should say. There was that video that went viral during the combine where he was, helping the homeless guy in the street. Like, he doesn't have to do that, but he took it upon himself to help the homeless guy in the street in Indianapolis. That's the type of guy that you are getting in this locker room if you're the Tennessee Titans. On the field, arm strength, his accuracy, it's fine, right? Completes a little over 60% of his passes, at least he did at Liberty. And we know he's got a rocket arm. Like, I felt like if he reaches his ceiling, he could be a lesser version of Josh Allen. Well, Josh Allen, in my view, is to me, the third best quarterback in football behind Brady and Mahomes. Okay, so if he is a little bit less a version of Josh Allen, then you could have yourself, you could be contending for some Super Bowls, Titans fans. But this is what I liked about Malik Willis. I think you saw flashes of that last night. Getting outside the pocket, moving around. He had that really nice kind of, sidearm throw, moving to his left, like athletic kid. Again, accuracy isn't perfect, but you can patch that up, right, as time goes on. The Titans have always had solid offensive coaches. The only thing I am concerned about, at least in the here and now, should Malik Willis replace Ryan Tannehill, which I'll get to in just a second, the only thing that would concern me is that the Titans' weapons group isn't great, right? We know they drafted the kid out of Arkansas. Treylon Burks is, I think, his name. Really good deep threat. Could he, in year one, replace A.J. Brown? I doubt that. A.J. Brown is pushing to be a top 10 receiver if he isn't already. But I do think if he pans out, if they're able to bring more and more skill position guys in, don't forget you have the best running back in football in Derrick Henry. Offensive line's no slouch. The only concern for the Titans to me is the defense. It can be hit and miss. But we know Mike Vrabel is a great coach. He's proven that. I mean, heck, with Ryan Tannehill throwing for sub 100 yards a game, Tennessee got to the AFC Championship just a few years ago on the back of Derrick Henry and on the back of Mike Vrabel leading that defense. And so I think coming into a franchise that has proven to be well-run, good ownership, good general manager, excellent head coach, and solid scouting department too, right? They draft well. I think Malik Willis is a guy who can pan out for you. Now, the question is not whether Malik Willis is the quarterback of the future for Tennessee, because I think he is. Right? I think within the next 2 to 3 years, Malik Willis will be the starting quarterback without a question, no competition for the Tennessee Titans. I think the question is, though, this year. We know Ryan Tannehill is going to be the week 1 starter. We know the Titans are sort of in that. They're definitely a very good team. They're absolutely a team that could win their division, make the playoffs, but I don't think any of us are sold that they could be a Super Bowl contender. I mean, just remember last year, they were the number 1 seed, and they got knocked out immediately against this eventual AFC champ Cincinnati Bengals at home. Why is that? Well, obviously, Derrick Henry went down, and when he went down, the offense went down with him. And, of course, by the time he came back, he was rusty. But the number one reason, not the only reason, there's many factors go into a playoff game, but the biggest reason the Titans lost that playoff game to Cincinnati, Ryan Tannehill. Right? As I said, all 3 of his interceptions came at absolutely horrible times for the Titans. All 3. You go back and look. Terrible. First play of the game, the Titans are driving down in the third quarter. They get in the red zone, and he throws a pick. And at the end of the game, of course, he throws the interception. Bengals just get a few yards, and they kick the game-winning field goal. Okay, so I don't think Malik Willis is a Titan today if there wasn't at least a little bit of doubt inside of that franchise. And so when you look at the bottom line is, how could Ryan Tannehill fare against the Titans' schedule? Now, some of that's hinging on whether Derrick Henry stays healthy or not. But here's the Titans' schedule. I'll read it off for the podcast audience. Okay, so they start with a home game, afternoon against the New York Giants. We saw the Giants weren't exactly, impressive yesterday. Although I think that offense isn't going anywhere. Daniel Jones ain't that guy. He's a backup at this point. Right, the Giants are not a good football team. Tennessee will beat the Giants probably easily. But where it starts to get a little dicey, however, is they go to Buffalo, who a lot of people have as the favorites to come out of the AFC and go to the Super Bowl. Right, you go to Buffalo in that rowdy environment. That's a tough game to win. Okay, week 3, you come back home, but you play a Vegas Raiders team that made the playoffs and got better. Whereas the Titans made the playoffs, but they got a little worse in the offseason considering the fact that they did trade A.J. Brown. All right, so that's a tough one. Then you go to Indianapolis. I'm telling y'all, I don't know what it is. I always fall into the Indianapolis Colts trap every single season. Love their roster, love their coaching staff, love their front office. I think they're a threat to possibly come out of the AFC. A dark horse threat, but still a threat. I think they'll win the division. I'll say the Titans split with the Colts this year, right? Then they go to Washington. Washington's an average football team. We assume that they should probably win that football game, right? And then you got some Houston in there. I like Davis Mills, don't like the rest of the roster. Then they go to Kansas City. This is Arrowhead Stadium we're talking about, folks. This is Patrick Mahomes, this is Andy Reid. I highly doubt they win that game, right? Then they come back home to play a Denver Broncos who, just traded for this guy named Russell Wilson. They're going to be significantly better, right? Then they go to Green Bay. Now, I'm still debating as to whether Green Bay will be a playoff team this year, but that is Lambeau Field. That is Aaron Rodgers. Okay, and Tennessee struggles to stop the run, and Green Bay has a very, very good run game with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Okay, then Tennessee comes back home, and they play the team that they lost to in the playoffs, the Cincinnati Bengals. That's a tough one. Then they go on the road to Philadelphia. A lot of people think Philly's going to be a playoff team. Come home, play Jacksonville. I don't think Jacksonville's a playoff team, but I do think that they will double their wins this season to 6, right? That they'll be a little better. They go to the Chargers. Chargers got significantly better in the offseason. Come home to play Houston on Christmas Eve, okay? They should beat Houston. Home game on a Thursday night against Dallas. That's a go-either-way game. And then they go on the road to play. Aside from your Texans and your Jaguars, every other game, I mean, and definitely the Giants, they'll beat the Giants. A lot of toss-ups in there, right? And some of that's because the NFL probably now more than ever doesn't have a ton of just crappy football teams. Like that's even the ones that we think of as really bad. Think about Jacksonville. Jacksonville got better this offseason. They upgraded their coaching staff. They made some additions in free agency to help Trevor Lawrence. So the bad teams are getting better, and there's not that many bad teams. So that has something to do with it. But I think the weapons disadvantage that Tennessee is going to have in a lot of these games is significant. And so if Ryan Tannehill isn't able to make those guys work, the new rookie they drafted, Treylon Burks, they had this other kid who looked solid, right? Slot receiver. Do they decide to turn to Malik Willis? If it starts to get a little dire, do they decide, hey, let's see where the rookie can take us? I'm a big proponent of, look, can a rookie quarterback learn more behind a veteran quarterback? Of course he can, right? Everybody points to Aaron Rodgers with Brett Favre, or Patrick Mahomes with Alex Smith, or Steve Young with Joe Montana. But you can't get better as a player unless you play. Practice can only take you so far, folks, until you're thrown into the real-life action, especially, road games where you got thousands upon thousands of people screaming at the top of their lungs. A whole different story. It's not practice anymore. As Allen Iverson said, we talking about practice, man. The game is a whole different story. So I do think that there's a chance if Ryan Tannehill is not able to make those other weapons around him work, depending on how Derrick Henry gets off to start the season, and I still think he's a top 10 player in football, that will, that all depend on whether or not Ryan Tannehill can take them there. It's a quarterback's league. And if he doesn't, against what is a pretty tough schedule, we could see Malik Willis take some snaps this season for the Tennessee Titans, and not in mop-up duty. Some real-life NFL games. He could get some starts next season. Think about, sort of the middle of their schedule, right? Indianapolis is tough. They'll beat Houston. But once we start talking about Kansas City, Denver, Green Bay, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, those are some tough games. All of those teams outside of Green Bay have tremendous weapons. Kansas City, even without Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce didn't retire, okay? He's still there. Okay, Denver, still loaded with weapons. Green Bay is not, but it's still Lambeau Field. It's a tough place to win. Cincinnati, excellent weapons. Same with Philadelphia. Even Jacksonville upgraded their receiving core over the offseason. Chargers did, right? So I think whether or not that Tannehill's able to keep them in some of those games and play well in those games, that's going to be, what's the deciding factor. I think there is a 50-50, I would even go so far as to say 60-40 chance that Malik Willis does come in at the half point in the season or later on. So we'll see. I think there is a real possibility that this kid gets some snaps. Again, you can't get better as a player unless you get out in the field. You can learn behind the veteran quarterback. Ryan Tannehill's a veteran. He's been in the league for a decade, right? He's played in some big games. He understands how the NFL works. Malik Willis can learn from him. But I do think that, again, there's a reason that Tennessee took Malik Willis. If they were confident in Ryan Tannehill, they're not taking a quarterback in the third round. They're not. Maybe they take one in like the fifth or sixth round, but he's no threat to Tannehill. So we'll see. I think, I'm telling you, I think there's a possibility this kid starts. And I really like his talent and upside, and I really like his intangibles. And if you have both and you come into a well-run franchise like Tennessee in a division that historically isn't great, you could have some success in this league. Now, glass half empty would tell you, yeah, AFC is absolutely stacked with great young quarterbacks. And so maybe it's going to be a little bit tougher for him opposed if he were in the NFC to sort of adjust to that. But it is what it is. I think he's somebody who can adjust to that, who's proven to adjust to that in college. I really like this kid. I think Pickett has a chance to be successful, given that he went to Pittsburgh. But I think Malik Willis, in terms of talent, and in terms of his intangibles, in terms of leadership, I think the Tennessee Titans might have a franchise quarterback in their hands. I really do. But it'll be interesting. Let's see. Falcons and Lions are playing right now. The Lions are driven right down the field. Is Jared Goff starting? Yeah, Jared Goff and the Lions' number one offense is playing on this drive. Again, Detroit will be better this year. I think they're a 5, 6, 7 win team, right? That, receiving core is good. Offensive line is, I think, pretty underrated. We know Jared Goff can win you some games here and there if he's got the perfect system. Atlanta, on the other hand, very well could be the worst team in football this year. Right there, Calvin Ridley suspended for the year. They traded Matt Ryan. Marcus Mariota is their quarterback this season. Like, they might be tanking. There's a chance that Atlanta's tanking for a guy like, say, a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young. The the kid from Kentucky is Will Levis, I think is his name. Atlanta's going to be pretty bad this year. So, and the Lions just scored. There you go. 6-0. Man, so good to have football back. By the way, there's another game later tonight I'm interested in watching, the Niners and the Packers. Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play. He shouldn't play. It's the preseason. You're not putting Aaron Rodgers out there and a chance he gets hurt. I'm curious to see if Trey Lance plays. Because, yes, is he the guy? Absolutely. The Niners have been vocal about that. They've committed to him. He is their guy. But I do think, and I've said on the show multiple times for the last year and a half, what Trey Lance needs in order to get ready, kind of going back to this whole Malik Willis thing, he needs to be on the field as much as possible. So do you play him, this being the first preseason game, do you play him a quarter and a half, maybe even the entire first half? Maybe. Or do you save that for, say, the second or third preseason game? But, yeah, San Francisco, to me, like I said, and I'm about to get into Jimmy Garappolo in this next topic, if Trey Lance is above average, the Niners are a Super Bowl contender. That's how great that their roster is. Because think about how bad Jimmy G was in those playoff games against Dallas and against Green Bay, and the Niners still pulled it off. They still got to the NFC Championship game and had a 10-point lead over the eventual Super Bowl champs. That's how good this football team is. That's how good this coaching staff is. Trey Lance is above average. Yeah, this team is going to be a big, big problem in an NFC that doesn't have a whole lot of contenders. Like I've said, to me, today, because San Francisco's sort of a wild card, you're not real sure what you're getting from them. The only two, like, no doubt, no question about it, I think most people agree on Super Bowl contenders are the Rams and the Bucks. That's it. I don't buy Green Bay because of their, the losses that they've had in the receiving core, losing Devontae Adams. They haven't drafted receivers horribly well in the last few years, so I don't buy Green Bay. I don't buy Dallas as a Super Bowl contender. Seattle got worse. Arizona's too much chaos for them to be a Super Bowl contender. So NFC, AFC, it's crazy. It used to be the NFC that was more loaded. That's part of the reason that Belichick and Brady got to so many Super Bowls for 20 years, because the AFC usually didn't have that many great quarterbacks. They were mostly all in the NFC. Times have changed, so it'll be interesting to see. And sticking in the AFC, talking about the Cleveland Browns, apparently Deshaun Watson's going to start tonight. That's not the topic, but apparently he is going to play tonight for the Browns. I'll be interested to see what the reception is from the crowd in Cleveland. I know he's gotten some standing ovations at training camp. I think it even makes the NFL still feel, the fact that he's on the field, even though it's a meaningless, counts for nothing preseason game. I'm telling you, the NFL does not want this guy in the field this season. Roger Goodell actually vocalized that the other day. He was talking about, he used the word predatory behavior from Deshaun Watson. We don't want to see him on the field this season. I'd say the NFL doesn't even love Deshaun being out there for a preseason game, which we know suspended players, unless they're suspended indefinitely, can play in the preseason because it's essentially just a game in front of fans during training camp. But the bigger picture sort of for the Browns is it all hinges obviously on the Watson suspension. I saw the other day Deshaun and his team would be content with an 8-game suspension. Doubt the NFL will go with that, but it's 6 now. Deshaun and his team are good with 8, which I think says a lot about how this situation is playing out and where it's going and what the NFL is trying to do. But a report came out from Mary Kay Cabot of Cleveland.com. She's kind of like the number one Browns insider. Like, she was all over the Baker Mayfield story, and she's all over this Deshaun Watson situation and in regards to what the Browns are going to do at the quarterback position in Deshaun's absence. Now, 2 weeks ago, before I get into this report, 2 weeks ago, I said on this show, you can go back, check the tape. I said, look, a lot of people are suggesting Seattle or the New York Giants for Jimmy Garoppolo. And while he would absolutely be the number one guy if he goes to both places, no question, he does not make either team a playoff team, right? The Giants still have way too many holes at way too many positions, and Seattle's an absolute dumpster fire. They couldn't make the playoffs with Russell Wilson. So they're not making it with Jimmy Garoppolo, especially in that division. And so that all being said, I'm like, why not Cleveland? They have the most cap space in the league. And Jimmy, at $48 million, Jimmy Garoppolo is making $23 million, and then he becomes a free agent this coming spring. So it's a one-year rental. You have the cap space to do it. Maybe you have some questions about whether or not Jacoby Brissett can keep you in playoff contention, and you don't know how long Deshaun Watson is going to be out. Jimmy Garoppolo gives you a sure thing because of, again, the offense in Cleveland is very similar to that in San Francisco. It is absolutely a run-first offense based off the play action, good tight ends, really excellent skill position players at wide receiver, tremendous top 5 offensive line in football, and a really good defense. Not as good as San Fran's, but a great defense, or a very good defense led by a great pass rusher in Myles Garrett. Very similar situations. And so I said, I think it works. I think that is a trade that would work for Cleveland in terms of staying in contention. And I'll sort of get into that aspect of it as we move forward the segment. But the report from Mary Kay Cabot, Cleveland.com, she reports that the Browns will consider trading for 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo if Peter Harvey, who was appointed by the NFL for their appeal of the Watson suspension, if Peter Harvey's ruling results in a significantly longer suspension for Watson. So she said the Browns will definitely, no question, they will look into trading for Jimmy G should Deshaun Watson get suspended further than 6 games. So first of all, like I said, I told you so. I think it works in terms of football. And something else, too, that you got to look at for the Browns. Because of their horrendous management, garbage ownership, and a bad job by the general manager, Andrew Berry, I think is his name, they traded all those picks, including next year's first-round pick, for Deshaun Watson. So, for anyone who maybe feel bad for the Cleveland Browns that gave up these picks, no need. This is their fault. They made their bed. They're going to have to lay in this one. Okay? But Cleveland is in a very awkward position because, A, they don't stink. They've got 2 years ago, they just made the playoffs, and they almost beat Kansas City. Okay? This is a team that has, like I said, excellent running game, elite offensive line, excellent skill position players, and a very, very good defense, like a borderline top 10 defense in football. They could absolutely make the playoffs. No question about it. Even in a loaded AFC, they can absolutely make the playoffs. And their coaching staff, never forget, Kevin Stefanski did just win Coach of the Year 2 years ago. So, and even, by the way, even if the Browns did suck, which they have for the better part of the last 2-3 decades, even if the Browns did suck, they don't have a first-round pick. Okay, so they can't tank. They can't, just throw the season, win 2-3 games and get the number 1 pick. No, they don't have a first-round pick. So they still, regardless of what happens with Deshaun, they got to commit to this season. They got to make the best effort they can to get into the playoffs and go as far as they can. And I believe Jimmy Garoppolo can take them further than Jacoby Brissett, as much as I love Jacoby Brissett as a backup. But Jimmy G is a clear starter in this league. He has worked in that Niners offense. Now, again, he is a type of quarterback where the situation does have to be borderline perfect for him to succeed. But in Jimmy's defense, there are other quarterbacks who would screw it up. Carson Wentz. So going to a very similar situation, very similar offense in Cleveland, I think it works. Something else, too, that I didn't bring up 2 weeks ago that I think is important. Everybody talks about, well, you've already got the drama of Deshaun and all the legal stuff with the NFL and the Browns front office and all this drama. There hasn't been that many quarterbacks. I can name a few, but there haven't been that many quarterbacks that have handled drama and controversy better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Never forget, he was Tom Brady's backup for 4 years, for 3.5 years in New England. And remember, in 2017, we found out Belichick wanted to start Jimmy Garoppolo over Tom Brady. And Brady's like, no, we're trading this guy out of here. Brady pushed for Bob Kraft to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, which he did. And so he's used to the sort of a drama of the whole backing up Brady thing, even though he was he was Tom Brady's greatest backup of his career. So much so Belichick wanted to start him. And again, this is the same Belichick who's got a defensive coordinator and special teams guy running the offense, but that's neither here nor there. I talked about that in yesterday's show. Then he goes to San Francisco, right? Gets to the Super Bowl. I don't think he had a big part to play in the Niners getting there. But point is, got to the Super Bowl, missed that big throw that would have won the Super Bowl. Okay, he had an injury the next year. And so the Niners say, okay, we're not sure if we have that guy that can truly take us over the top or stay healthy. So we're going to trade all these picks to get Trey Lance with the 3rd overall pick. And so last season, Jimmy Garoppolo is the starter, but he's got to constantly look over his shoulder at Trey Lance because he's not sure. Will the Niners replace him? Will they not? He had some pretty bad games in there. And so dealing with the pressure of, okay, they could replace me at any minute. So he's used to dealing with some pressure and some drama and some controversy. Now, we know Cleveland, they create drama. The word drama, I think, came from Cleveland, Ohio. From the Browns, more specifically. Yeah, that they it's like they're trying to cause as much as possible because they're about as poorly run a franchise as there is in football. But Jimmy G's a guy who can handle that, as well as most quarterbacks in the league. So I think this does work. This report does not shock me in the slightest. And I think it's something that the Browns, again, according to this report, they will consider it. I absolutely think they should. Right? Jimmy G understands the drama and the pressure that comes with these situations. Now, New England and San Francisco, drama, it doesn't even come close to that in Cleveland. However, he understands sort of the gist of what's going on here. Also, Browns have a ton of cap space, most cap space in the league. And they'd still have over half of what they have now if they were to trade for Jimmy G. Okay? Again, I think it works. Jimmy G goes to an offense that is very similar to that in San Francisco, so it really fits his comfort level. And this is, if they make this trade, I think the Browns are probably a playoff team. I think they jump teams like, say, Miami or Pittsburgh possibly, or Tennessee, like sort of that group of teams. I think Cleveland gets in the playoffs should that happen, in my view. But I'm telling you, I think it works. I really do. But who knows, man? It's Cleveland. Who knows, man? Like this is a franchise that gave a quarterback with 30 allegations of sexual assault misconduct. This is the same franchise that gave him the largest guaranteed contract in NFL history. And I think next year I read he's going to make like $54 million. And again, fully guaranteed. But if there was one franchise that would make this move, this would be the one that I would choose to make it, because this is what they do. But shifting from the NFL, although first let me check I'm checking preseason scores. This is how desperate I am for football, folks. Okay, so the Falcons are driving into Lions territory. They got a 1st and goal inside the 5, down 7-0. So they'll look to tie this game up against Detroit, who, by the way, the Lions are on Hard Knocks, which to me, that's a great team to have on Hard Knocks, right? They have a very animated coach. They have a roster full of fun guys. We understand that the number one thing in Detroit is trying to win football games and do it in the most physical, hit you in the mouth way that they can.
Kneecap.
Kneecaps for everyone during training camp this year, and certainly during Hard Knocks. So I think it's a fun team to have for Hard Knocks. You're going to see, you compare it to last year's Hard Knocks with the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy. Neither, I think, are good coaches, McCarthy or Dan Campbell, but at least the motivational speeches by Campbell will dwarf that of McCarthy's. Remember Harry High School and Johnny F around it. I forgot about that, man. That was funny. Dan Campbell's speech is going to be a little bit more, I guess, motivating, if you will, than Coach McCarthy's. Gosh, I kind of missed that. That was funny. Okay, focus, Bryson. Moving on now to Draymond Green, my man, Golden State Warriors 2022 NBA champions, in case y'all haven't heard. But Draymond Green, who has, in my opinion, the second best basketball podcast out there right now. To me, the number one is The Old Man of the Three, hosted by JJ Redick. Love that show. And ironically, we're going to play a clip from The Old Man of the Three in the next segment, so stay tuned for that. But the Draymond Green Show, the Volume Sports, Love it. Get some great interviews. He did one recently with DeMar DeRozan that was a great listen. He did an interview with Steph Curry a few months ago that was really good. So be sure to check out his show. Keep doing your podcast, Draymond. Don't listen to what nobody says. But he did a show recently where all he did was just answer fan questions. And so one of the questions was, and we love to debate this as basketball fans, I do, I know y'all do, is not necessarily who the 5 greatest players ever are, but your lineup, right? 1 through 5, who's your lineup? Who is your dream lineup if you could pick any player at any position in NBA history? And Draymond Green, I'll put it up now. I'll read it off to the podcast audience. He said Steph Curry at point guard, Michael Jordan at shooting guard, LeBron at small forward, Tim Duncan at power forward, and Shaq playing the center, Shaq playing the 5. And, I was watching this live as he was saying this, sort of listing each guy. And it was kind of surprising, kind of shocking. I'm like, I literally agree with every single one. And it's not in all of these cases are the guys the best this in NBA history. Now, you look in the middle, Michael's unquestionably the greatest shooting guard ever. Most people, including myself, think he's the greatest player ever. LeBron, no question, greatest small forward ever. And Duncan, no question, greatest power forward ever. But no one really thinks Steph is the greatest point guard ever, although I think he's second to Magic. And nobody thinks Shaq is the greatest center ever. But I think if we're talking about two things, if we're talking about the all-time starting 5. My criteria, and I think it seemed to be Draymond's criteria, although I won't speak for him, is A, who were they at their peak, at their apex? And I've always said Shaq is not the greatest center ever. That's Kareem. That is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, no doubt about it. However, Shaq at his peak was better than Kareem. At Shaq's best, the problem for Shaq, reason I don't put him over Kareem, is Kareem has more championships and far more MVPs, and Kareem sustained it over a long period of time. Shaq's prime was about 7, 8, 9 years. Kareem's was like 15, 16. So that has something to do with it. Well, Kareem took better care of his body than Shaq, and so that factors in as well. That's why Kareem played 20-something years, and Shaq, well, Shaq played about 20 years, but those last like 3, 4 were kind of rough. Okay. But Shaq at his apex, look at his finals numbers. For those of you that are maybe sort of new to the NBA and new basketball fans, you're like, wait, time out. How does Kobe have 5 championships and only 2 finals MVPs? And I present to you Shaquille O'Neal. Look at his finals numbers in that Lakers 3-peat run. They're like 2K stuff. And we're talking like, I think one series he averaged like 38 points, like 14 rebounds. I mean, he's just dominant. Just best player on the floor by a mile, and his teammate was Kobe Bean Bryant. Okay, so at his apex, Shaq is the greatest center ever. At his apex. Now, all time, it's Kareem. But something I've always said was underrated about Shaq. Shaq was a good passer at the big man spot, right? He had solid footwork down low, was able to score in any way, shape, or form in the paint. And Draymond putting Steph Curry as his point guard over Magic, here's why he did that. And not just because Steph's his teammate, because Draymond keeps it real, right? He put Steph at the point over Magic because LeBron can do a lot of things that Magic can do. Everybody always compares LeBron to Michael. They're different players. If you want to talk about who's greater, okay, but in how they play, it's not the same. Kobe is far more comparable to Michael, whereas LeBron is far more comparable to Magic in how they play. Now, LeBron, obviously, better scorer than Magic, better shooter. But in terms of rebounding, getting out in the fast break, LeBron, to me, is one of the 3 or 4 greatest passers of all time. Magic's the greatest, but LeBron's not far off. All the things Magic could do, LeBron can do certainly he could score at a higher level than Magic. But even in running the point, which LeBron has done for a large portion of his career, he can do the things Magic could do, and in some cases better. So why have essentially 2 Magic Johnsons when you could have LeBron and the greatest shooter who ever lived? And when you're talking about an elite passer like LeBron, and even one like Shaq, I wouldn't call Shaq an elite passer, but a very good one at being a center, and you set him up with a guy who can knock shots down from 40, 45 feet out, man, that's tough to pass up on. Okay? And I've heard people say, when they talk about these all-time starting 5s, putting Kobe in it. And I've always said that wouldn't make any sense from a basketball perspective because Kobe is just a slightly lesser version of Michael Jordan. Okay, so and if you're choosing between Jordan and Kobe, you're going to choose Jordan. Tim Duncan, obviously, but I think by a pretty comfortable, not by a mile, but a comfortable margin, is the greatest power forward of all time. Like we know what that guy did in his career. I've always said that the peak of Tim Duncan's career, again, we're talking about all five of these guys, their peak. Curry, Jordan, LeBron, Duncan, and Shaq at their peak. Duncan at his peak was the Game 7 against the Detroit Pistons when he almost had a quadruple-double. That's how great he was. Okay, when Duncan retired, the Spurs have never been the same. They have never been the same ever since he retired in 2016. And then, of course, LeBron, that speaks for itself, right? He's the greatest small forward ever. There's people out there who think he's the greatest player ever. I, for one, have said in the show, I'm still giving him a shot. He's going to pass Kareem this upcoming season. That'll be a huge bump on LeBron's legacy in terms of him being the GOAT. Because, my generation, future, LeBron scored far more points than Jordan. Matter of fact, he scored more points than anybody that's ever played the game. Yeah, he has fewer championships, but was greater for longer, right? Won on 3 different teams. Everywhere he went was instantly a championship contender. And when he left, they were garbage. He's elevated weird players like Kyrie Irving, underachievers like Anthony Davis. Like he makes everybody work. He took, to me, the peak LeBron. We're talking about the peaks of these guys. Now I'll get to Jordan and Steph. The peak of Shaq was that 3-peat run with the Lakers. The peak of Duncan was around 2003, 2004, right? The peak LeBron, for me, as great as he was in that, I think it was the 2012-13 season when he should have won Defensive Player of the Year, and he was just great. As great as he was that year, 2018 LeBron's the best LeBron I've ever seen in my life. That Cavs team had no business making it past the first round. You know how I know that? Because that exact same Cavs team came back the next year with no LeBron. He had left to go to the Lakers, and they were one of the worst teams in the league. If they may have finished last in the Eastern Conference. LeBron James took them to the NBA Finals. That's what he did. And he was dropping 40-point games regularly. Like every other game, he's scoring 40 points. I remember, there was a point, in the Eastern Conference Finals, and he was, getting interviewed after the game, and they showed a stat line, and it said, 7th or 8th, whatever it was, 40-point game, the playoffs. Do we realize how great that is? Guys score 40 points, wow, that's incredible, and it is. You have 7 or 8 of those in a playoff run. That's ridiculous. And the Cavs needed every single one of those 40-point games just to get to the finals. That Cavs team was one of the worst finals teams in NBA history. But they got there because of LeBron. So when people try and knock LeBron for his finals record, say, well, he's 4-6. I'm like, man, the 6th finals loss, are we really going to knock him for that? We're saying his legacy would be greater if he didn't make it to the finals that year? Come on. So all that to say, 2018 LeBron is the greatest LeBron I've ever seen in my life, without a shadow of a doubt. No question about it. As great as 2013 LeBron was, 2018 was just different. Peak Jordan, 3-peat. Or I should say the second 3-peat. As great as he was in the first 3-peat, he's sort of starting to wind down a little bit. I think from Jordan, we saw in that second 3-peat, especially the last dance, 1998, what you saw from Michael, at least in the finals, was obviously, we saw for those first 5 championships, of course, he was the best player on the floor. No question, not even close. But in that last finals, that was the first time that I think the Bulls were playing a superior team. I don't think the Bulls were better than the Jazz that year. Okay, you got to realize this is John Stockton, the all-time assist leader. This is Karl Malone, 3rd most points in NBA history. And that team had incredible depth. They could shoot. They could really play defense. They were well coached. That Jazz team was one of the greatest teams to never win the finals, the 1998 Utah Jazz. And that Game 6, to me, that's the pinnacle of Michael Jordan, the Game 6 of 1998. We know about the game-winning shot, holding the pose, crossing up Brian Russell, all the Utah fans, it's like that still shot of Jordan shooting the shot. And there's all the fans in Utah like, oh my God, like they knew he was going to knock it down, win the game and win the championship. Scotty, he had back problems, didn't play well. Rodman wasn't very good. Jordan didn't get a ton of help. He might've scored like half their points or almost half their points. That was the pinnacle of Michael Jordan. And as for Steph Curry, I think we just saw the pinnacle in 2022. People point to 2016, right? Because that was his unanimous MVP season. That's never been done before. He hit a record that it's going to take a while to break this one. 402 threes in a season, when up until that season, no one had ever hit 300, and he hit 400. 73-9, led the league in scoring, led the league in steals. As great as that Steph was, this Steph that we just saw in the finals was better. Because this is a guy, and Draymond talked about this, Andre Iguodala talked about this recently on their respective podcast, that over the last few years, we've seen a little bit of a mindset shift in Steph. Not that he wasn't aggressive in the first 10, 11 years of his career, but you've seen sort of him truly live up to the nickname baby-faced assassin. We know he's always lived up to the greatest shooter of all time, label, but the baby-faced assassin. Like the greatest example of that was the game 4 against Boston when he scored 43 and had 10 rebounds. Like that one was just, he was on a different level that night. He had one bad game in the finals, game 5. Outside of that, he scored 30 in 4 of the 5 games. Like knocking down threes, crossing guys up, getting to the rim, playing solid defense. Gary Payton was talking about that recently. Gary Payton II, I should say, was talking about that recently. Talking about, Steph, has improved drastically on defense. John didn't like, John's is a Bulls fan. He disagrees with my 1998 finals point, saying that the Jazz were better. And John says, nah, we was better. Listen, I don't think it was like by a wide margin. The only reason I say, John, that the Jazz were better was partly because they were healthier. And by the way, remember, they did have home court advantage in that finals because at that time it was the finals was the 2-3-2 format, right? The team with home court gets the first 2 games. The other team gets games 3 through 5, and then the team with home court advantage gets games 6 and 7 at home. So the Jazz did have home court. They were healthier. Scottie Pippen didn't give them much at all. Rodman didn't have a great series. Like that was Michael carrying the Bulls. Going back to what I was talking about with Steph, that was Steph carrying the Warriors to the 2022 title. That was, to me, the biggest shock of the finals was that Steph had to carry the Warriors. Like we know Wiggins had that big game 5. Clay was, he was up and down. He played poorly in the first 2 games. Good game 3, okay game 4, played well in the fourth quarter. And, game 5, he played well. And in game 6, Clay, he was terrible, at least, with his shot. Draymond up until game 6 was terrible in the finals. The bench didn't give you much. And Steph still carried them over, that Boston Celtics team that had the number 1 defense in basketball and won some key road games, that game 4 and, of course, the game 6 to clinch the title. So when we go back to the Draymond starting 5, I agree with it. The peaks of those guys' career, and also the second criteria that I was going to talk about with Draymond is how well these guys would have fit with each other. How well that this 5 is there any starting 5 that would fit better than this one? Because we know all 5 guys can score. Like the best scorer out of this group, I would probably say Michael, followed by LeBron, followed by Steph, Shaq, and then finished out with Duncan. Defensively, Shaq was never a great defender, but he could block some shots. Duncan was an elite defender. LeBron in his prime, elite defender. Jordan won a defensive player of the year, elite defender. Steph was not an elite defender by any stretch, but still a serviceable one and can play great team defense. Remember, Steph did lead the league in steals in 2016. So he plays some defense. He's not James Harden, okay? And so you have that. You have the scoring. You have the fact that a lot of these guys have played outside of LeBron, these guys have played in very similar systems, moving the basketball, good shooters around them. We do know that about LeBron. He's at his best when he's got shooters around him to kick it out to when the help defense collapses. When he gets in the paint. Steph's a great shooter. Jordan, elite mid-range shooter. LeBron is a better three-point shooter than mid-range. Obviously, can get to the bucket. Duncan, great scorer down low. And Shaq, as I always said, the most dominant player within 5 feet of the basket in NBA history. I totally agree with all 5, 1 through 5. I totally agree with Draymond Green starting 5. But if y'all in the comments or y'all, if y'all watching on YouTube or on Twitter or Facebook, chime in. Tell me what your all-time starting 5 is, and we'll get to that hopefully at some point in today's show. And so while y'all are hopefully cooking that up, I want to thank Dwyane Wade. Okay, Dwyane Wade's always been one of my favorite players of all time. I think we know the 2 greatest shooting guards ever are Michael and Kobe. And there's always been kind of that debate about that number 3. Is it Jerry West or is it, some have said James Harden. I'm not yet, not without a championship. Got to win a championship to be in that class. Is it Jerry West or is it Dwyane Wade? I would probably lean West. But on a day where I would feel confident Dwyane Wade, you could probably shift me into D Wade. Point being, he's always been one of my favorite players, right? We know how huge he was in that Miami-Dade County community and the face of the Miami Heat for nearly 2 decades. And we know about the All-Star appearances and winning 3 championships. He got a Finals MVP in 2006 in what was only his 3rd year in the league. I mean, keep in mind, he had Shaq and, an older Alonzo Mourning, but Alonzo Mourning was still on the roster. Gary Payton was on that roster. And Dwyane Wade, again, over Shaq, won Finals MVP as a youngster in his 3rd year out of Marquette. But Dwyane Wade was on the podcast that I just dubbed, to me, the best basketball podcast right now, The Old Man and the 3, hosted by my man JJ Redick. And he was talking about sort of this narrative that the media criticizes players who win championships with player-formed teams, if you will. Like say LeBron, and they were asking him about the Heatles, where it was LeBron, D Wade, and Chris Bosh. They formed their own team. The front office didn't do it. The players did. They teamed up. And how the media sort of looks down upon guys that do that, as opposed to players, all-time like Magic and Larry, who played with guys who the organization put around them.
It just wasn't something that was really the sexy thing to do. And at that moment when we made a decision as players and kind of put the control in the player's hand and change the dynamics of what people were used to, you always going to get hate. And if you think about it, no one gives backlash to any championships that Larry Bird won, that Magic Johnson won, that Michael Jordan won. Michael Jordan played with other Hall of Famers. You know what I mean? Like, guys, you don't win championships without playing with other guys that are great, first of all. But it wasn't done in the way that LeBron did it and the way that we did it. It was done from organizations. The organizations made sure that Larry Bird had McHale, Robert Parrish, Dennis Johnson. You know what I mean? Like all these Hall of Famers. And it was, so it was different.
Thank you. Been saying this for a very long time on this show. He talks about guys like Magic, Larry, Michael. Again, the organization put those great players around them. Those great players, great as they were very fortunate to have well-run front offices and general managers, more specifically, to put that great collection of talent around that superstar player. I'm going to criticize LeBron James playing for the horrendously run Cleveland Cavaliers, who at the very end of his time in his first stint in Cleveland, his second best player was Mo Williams. And he won 60 games in back-to-back seasons his last 2 years in his first stint in Cleveland. So I'm going to criticize him that Dan Gilbert can't put one borderline elite player around LeBron. And LeBron's like, man, screw this. I want to go play with a well-run franchise in the Miami Heat. I want to go play for a franchise run by Pat Riley with my good buddy Dwyane Wade. It never ceases to amaze me how so many people, not all, but so many people in the basketball media with sort of the past great players, Magic, Larry, Michael, even guys going back like, Dr. J, how we just skim over and completely ignore some of the flaws in their careers. Okay, Larry Bird in his first NBA Finals in 1981 had back-to-back games where he did not score double figures. He scored 8 points. Cedric, not Larry Bird, Cedric Cornbread Maxwell, because Larry Bird scored 8 points in 2 straight games. Nobody brings that up. Okay, Magic Johnson had a finals. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 1984. Magic Johnson had a finals where he was so bad, the newspapers at that time in Los Angeles called him Tragic Johnson. It doesn't get much worse than that. We don't talk about it. Michael Jordan, until he got Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, greatest player ever, was 1-9 in the playoffs until the Bulls drafted Scottie Pippen. 1-9. And people forget, you know how people in the media, anytime guys like LeBron or Steph or Giannis, guys like that win a championship, people always like to throw that little asterisk in, right? Like when the Warriors won in 2015, well, they did against a beat-up Cavs team. Or when the Lakers won the championship in 2020, well, it's because they were in the bubble. It's always an excuse that some people will try to throw out there. Could we remember the fact that in 1991, Michael Jordan's first NBA Finals, that right off the bat, James Worthy got hurt for the Lakers, and so it was basically Magic by himself? That the Bulls were playing an incredibly inferior, Los Angeles Lakers team. We're just going to completely ignore that. Never happened. That's something I think, too, that Dwyane Wade was alluding to. Is like we act like some of these great players, and it doesn't take away from their greatness. All the things I mentioned about Bird, Magic, Michael, it doesn't take away from their greatness. The flaws that they had in their career, the downside that they had in their career. Matter of fact, it adds to it because they bounce back from it. That adds to your greatness. But just because LeBron goes from crappy run Cleveland to great Miami, oh, he's disqualified from, the GOAT debate. That doesn't make any sense. If anything, I think it's actually kind of a compliment to the players that they themselves put together this group that won a championship, right? They won 2 championships in Miami. Steph Curry recruited Kevin Durant, and they won 2 championships together and made a third finals. Why is that looked at as a bad thing? I swear to you, I have never understood that as long as I've lived, as long as I've watched basketball. I think Dwyane Wade hits the nail on the head. We act like the great players never made a mistake. We see the highlight reels. They never missed a shot. They never missed a defensive assignment. They never had a bad game or 2 or 3. Crap, it happens. They're human. Doesn't mean they're not great. But we take away from guys like the Stephs, like the LeBrons, like the Giannis's. Even they would take away from Kobe back in the day. I'm telling you, I don't get it. I really don't. It's that has never made sense to me, that just because guys either invite other great players to join them, or they join a great team, a well-run team, after playing for a poorly run team, we criticize them for that. I've always used examples. Say you are working somewhere and you're really, really talented at what you do. Maybe you're one of the higher ups of the company, but it's, the upper management isn't very good. Maybe you're not a fan of your boss, and you go to a company where you get to flourish more and where the company is better run. And we're going to criticize you for that. We're going to say, oh, that hurts your legacy as a businessman or as a businesswoman. That hurts your legacy, right? Like, we're going to knock for that. No, nobody would do that. But we do it in the NBA. And by the way, these are, 20-something, 30-something-year-old, guys who, unlike somebody in business, depending on what your business is, of course, but you can be successful for decades and decades and decades. Father Time is undefeated, although he's having one heck of a battle with Tom Brady, but he'll eventually come out on top. Everybody loses their athleticism. You lose it, I lose it. It's one of the depressing parts about life, right? But it's the reality. These guys only have so long, especially in their primes, the primes of their career, to win. And to me, I actually admire these guys that they're not. I mean, LeBron could have easily sat back in Cleveland and said, you know what? These guys, Cleveland can pay me more than Miami. I can make more money in Cleveland. I'll have a lesser chance to win championships, but I can make more money. It's comfortable. I'm the man. He said, nah, screw that. I'll take the public backlash if it means I get some, some jewelry. If it means I get to win some championships, I'll take that. I respect LeBron for that. Absolutely. I respected Kevin Durant for leaving Oklahoma City, who pampered Westbrook. And he said, no, I know what the backlash is going to be, and I'm going to go to Golden State. No, we kind of fell apart in the end in Golden State, but Katie said, I want to win. Screw the money, screw the. I want to win championships. I love guys who do that. Like, that's why I've kind of been like, what's Bradley Beal doing in Washington? Like, hey, get your money. You could still make a ton of money in Miami. No state taxes, Miami too, by the way. Like, I just don't get why we criticize the guys who are willing to do anything and everything to win. And we knock them for teaming up with other great players. Every great player who's ever won a championship had help, had great players around them. Magic had not just James Worthy. He had frickin' Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for all 5 of his championships. Kareem, before he joined or got traded to the Lakers, had Oscar Robertson. Jerry West had Wilt. Hakeem Olajuwon had Clyde Drexler. Steph Curry's had Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant. LeBron has had Wade, Bosh, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, Anthony Davis. You think about guys like Kobe had Shaquille O'Neal, and then he had Pau Gasol. He had Derek Fisher. Like, you need great players to win a championship, believe it or not. Like, the fact that we we act like Magic and Larry and Michael and these former players climbed Mount Everest by themselves, no hydration, no this, no that, to win the championship, and these guys are just pampered, and they don't they don't like the adversity. It's like, well, Larry did have Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish, and Michael did have Scottie Pippen, and at the end, Dennis Rodman, and he had Phil Jackson, the greatest coach ever, and Magic Johnson, and Kareem, and James Worthy, and Byron Scott on defense. Like, why do we knock these guys now for something that we don't knock the guys from the past? I've never understood that. Is it because some of the media are stuck in the past? Maybe. But I swear to you, it does not make sense to me. I've never understood it. And I can't say I ever will understand it, just because of the hypocrisy, the blatant hypocrisy behind it. So, yeah, I just wanted to get that out the window. It's just, I hate the double standard, and I hate the lack of consistency that we have in the NBA media sometimes. That's why you got Draymond Green out there calling it the new media, right? Yours truly, the new media. You got Draymond kind of getting into, who's sort of the originator of that. JJ Redick has been big on that. You've had, other guys. CJ McCollum is great in the media. Patrick Beverley, I don't know if he's great, but he's entertaining in the national media. You're having more and more players, not just be, we've had former players, whatever sport it is, come on as like analysts, but actually like starting their own shows. That's sort of where it's moving now. That's why Draymond is calling it the new media. So shout out D Wade for saying this, because we kind of needed this. We have some very, very big breaking news. Wow, this is actually very big. Hold on, let me get this pulled up here, because this kind of came out of left field, and it actually ironically involves baseball. We got some breaking news that according to Jeff Passan, Padres star Fernando Tatis Jr. violated Major League Baseball's performance-enhancing drug policy and is facing a suspension. Sources familiar to the situation told ESPN. Okay, so that is a massive, massive blow for the San Diego Padres, a team that I said when they made the deal to acquire Juan Soto, I said I think this is the third best team in the National League now, behind the Dodgers and the Mets. Now, the problem is they can't beat LA. I think they've lost like 17 of their last 19 games against the Dodgers. But this is huge news. So he's definitely not playing this year. And he was already, he's coming off an injury. And he may not play next year, folks. So we may not see Fernando Tatis Jr. until like 2024. Wow, that is a big one. That's a big loss for the Padres. Man, that's the first big like superstar PED suspensions that we've had since like A-Rod. Yeah, that's some big news. So Fernando Tatis is gone for the foreseeable future for the San Diego Padres. That is huge. I mean, this is a guy who's like an MVP contender. So, man, that's a huge blow to San Diego. But to our last topic of the day, it's only fitting we close it out with just an SMH. You know what I'm saying? Because Antonio Brown. I'm not going to read the apology because it's Antonio Brown. What did you expect? When I saw, or I'm sorry, not apology. Let me take that back. It was a regret, and somebody asked him asked Antonio Brown what his biggest regret was, and he said it wasn't calling his GM what he called his GM and throwing rocks at the UPS driver. And he said it darn sure wasn't me running off the field shirtless, throwing up deuces to the Jets fans. We all remember that game earlier this year. No, it was that I didn't get to see Antonio Brown play. This is coming straight from AB, by the way, that I didn't get to see Antonio Brown play. And he said, sure, I can watch the replays. I can, go on YouTube and watch me play, but actually seeing that greatness live, he said it was like, as if it wasn't blasphemous enough, as if it wasn't crazy enough for him to say it would be like seeing the Beatles. That in itself is just crazy. But then he says, or like seeing Jesus perform miracles. I don't know if I've ever said this on the show. I think I've hesitated to say it in the show in the past, but I've always believed it. I've said it before. I just don't know if I've said it in the show. AB really thinks he's God. I think this guy thinks that he is like this sort of almighty higher power. I swear to you, I do. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this guy. I mean, I want to give a shout out to Mike Tomlin today. Antonio Brown was with the Steelers for nearly a decade, and none of this stuff got out. This is like this Antonio Brown, just the word Antonio Brown, the name Antonio Brown, I should say, adds to Mike Tomlin's legacy. The fact that he dealt with this guy for 8-9 years, however long it was, and nobody knew how crazy this dude was until he went to Oakland with the Raiders, and then we know how that played out. With the Patriots, he played one game for them. And then at Tampa, it looked like it was going pretty well in Tampa, but then you had the fake vaccine ID. And then even worse, you had not even worse, the vaccine thing, you could be charged, criminally for that. But you had even, sort of for the whole world to see, where he just quit on the Bucs right in the middle of the game. And he, took his jersey off and his pads, threw that in the crowd, threw his gloves in the crowd, and ran off the field as the game is going on, throwing up the deuces to the Jets fans at MetLife Stadium. It's crazy. I'm telling you, I've never seen anything like this guy. That this dude literally thinks he's God. Literally, like I'm telling you, and now he's getting involved in a rap career. I trust me, as a fan of rap, I've listened to. He's not that good. He really isn't that good. I know he's friends with Kanye. If y'all putting this, Kanye's kind of gone off the rails now. But if we're expecting AB to be like the next Kanye, don't. Prime Kanye, graduation Kanye, my beautiful dark twisted fantasy Kanye. One of the greatest rappers ever. Like, I know AB is knows him. AB ain't gonna be Kanye West. Like, let's stop it right now. This guy's, the fact that Tomlin dealt with him and the fact that Brady dealt with him is congratulations to both men. for Brady only kept it in-house for like a year, which that in itself is accomplished. But Tomlin kept it in for like 9 years. It's incredible. Shout out to both those. As if Tom Brady wasn't already the GOAT. This adds to Tom's legacy that he was dealing with this guy who literally compared himself to Jesus Christ. That's what they were dealing with. Whew. Okay. Before we go, we have an update on the Fernando Tatis suspension. According to Jeff Passan of ESPN, Fernando Tatis Jr. will be suspended for 80 games. Major League Baseball announced the suspension will cover the remainder of this season and will render him ineligible for the postseason. It will continue into the beginning of next year. On the verge of returning, he is done for the year. So how far are we into the baseball season? Like 120 games or so? No, about 110 games. About 110 games or so, more or less into the season. And so 80 games. So Tatis would come back about early to mid-March next year. But yeah, that is definitely a big blow for the Padres. To me, this takes them out of World Series contention. The National League, to me, the American League is a two-team race between the Yankees and the Astros. I'm giving the edge to the Astros. The Yankees haven't played that great as of late. And then I'm going to give the edge to the Dodgers. To me, it's a two-team race between LA and then the New York Mets. While I like the Mets pitching staff better than LA's, and their offense has, improved better than any offense in baseball from last year to this year, and I think a lot of that has to do with Buck Showalter as well as the additions they made in the offseason. I trust LA's postseason experience far more than the Mets. I think Clayton Kershaw has finally, he did it in 2020, gotten the monkey off his back, the playoff failure monkey off his back. If Walker Buehler can come back, we know what this guy can be. He is as an ace if there ever was one. He comes from, pretty much the school where they grow baseball players, Vanderbilt University. He was great in college. He's been phenomenal with the Dodgers. To me, he is absolutely the ace over Kershaw, and Kershaw is still great. He started the All-Star game this year at Dodger Stadium. But the fact that the LA won all these games while beat up, man. To me, if the Dodgers had not gotten as beat up as they did last year, they would have beaten the Braves, and I think they would have beaten Houston in the World Series last year. So the Dodgers, to me, if they were healthy, would be back-to-back champs today. And so I had them winning the World Series coming in this year and beating Houston to do so. I feel very, very confident about that today. I am a sad Red Sox fan. We're about to play the Yankees. Matter of fact, we're playing the Yankees right now. So I'll suffer through that tonight and suffer through this series. I hate the Yankees. I hate the Yankees. But, it is what it is. This is not our year. But we're going to get a Dodgers-Astros rematch in the World Series. And the whole world outside of Houston, Texas will be pulling for LA. Whole world. To finally get revenge on the championship that they were quite literally cheated out of in 2017. So this postseason, I will be a Dodgers fan. But I think they will beat the Astros. All right. So we got some breaking news on the show that Fernando Tatis has been suspended 80 games. So the remainder of this season, obviously no playoffs for him. And so he won't come back until about May of next season. So that's a huge loss for the Padres. To me, takes them out of World Series contention. But man, we had a lot to discuss on the show today. A lot of NBA talk, a lot of NBA debates, a lot of, attacking media hypocrisy. Again, thank you very much, Dwyane Wade, for that. And, so yeah, lots to talk about on today's show, and I'm sure we'll have a ton of stuff, some preseason action in the NFL this weekend. So until Monday, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by as always. Be sure to check out Carving It Up Live. Check out Monday's episode of Carving Up Live at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. And also be sure to check out the Carving It Up podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, be sure to click that big red subscribe button and like, share, comment. Helps the channel grow exponentially. We'll get some content for y'all over the weekend from the last few shows for y'all to check out. So be on the lookout for that. So be sure, again, hit the subscribe button. Got some content coming this weekend. The NFL season is 27 days away. We're that close. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe out there. God bless you all. Peace out. Dang, I'll tell you, it's been a rough season for my Sox. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.